That's exactly right. We're going to talk about several topics tonight. We're going to talk about inflation and the economy because I think that's what every family is suffering with right now. Every family right now is struggling to prioritize what their costs will be. We'll talk a little bit about our border. We're going to give you guys a chance to ask us some questions. So if you want to be talking about something or ask a specific question on a topic, you'll get the chance to do that so you can be thinking about it. We're going to visit a little bit about this vice presidential candidate that Kamala has chosen, Tim Walz. I happen to know him pretty well, being my neighboring state, and we have taken just this last year, the last few months, over 7,000 Minnesotans and moved them over to South Dakota. We've had tens of thousands of Minnesotans who've decided to leave his state and come to South Dakota because of his policies and his dictator-type leadership skills that have been so devastating for his state. And then we're going to talk about the American dream and what that means. What does it look like under the choices that we have on the ballot this fall? But I know that with the tutor was just talking about our national security, and that's one of those issues that I think a lot of Americans need to stop and pause for a minute and really realize the threats that we have and the insecurities that we have. I'm a farmer and a rancher, and have spent my life, raising food to feed this country and to feed the world. We had a very large operation when I was younger. My dad was killed in an accident when I was young, and I ended up quitting college and taking over our businesses. But I've worked on food policy for 30 years, and I watched over those last 30 years as China systematically came in, and first they started buying up our chemical companies in the United States. Then they started buying up our seed and fertilizer companies. Then we saw America, for a period of time, embrace selling citizenship to the United States for investment in our processing facilities. The vast majority of our processing facilities and meat packing plants are owned by Chinese companies now, and people that are affiliated with the CCP. Now we have seen them come in, they've manipulated their currency, they've stolen our genetics and our IP, and now we're watching them buy our land and completing that full circle of our food production in the United States. China has had 1,000 years plan for world domination. They've been trying to take out the United States of America for hundreds of years. For the last 200 years, we have been a threat to them ever since we were established because we were so different in the experiment that our founders gave us. They gave us the most wonderful experiment in the history of the world by giving us this republic, and it was so different. And China has seen us as we rose to be the world's power as a threat to them, and they have a long-term plan to take us out, and they will make their people suffer in order to get that plan complete. If we think a pandemic was scary, wait until they control our food supply. And wait until you go to the grocery store and you realize you can't get food to feed your family because China's decided that you can't get your food. Did you know that they own quite a bit of our ports in the United States? The LA port that you hear Newsom bragging about all the time, it's 90% owned by Chinese companies and Chinese officials. They have started hoarding their shipping containers in China. Everything in this world that gets shipped across the ocean goes in a shipping container, doesn't it? Why do you think that they're keeping the shipping containers? So that we don't have access to them. That's what this election is about. That's how important it is to get President Trump back in the White House so that we have a strong leader that stands up for America, puts China back in its place, separates them between Russia and Iran. And when we can fight any of those enemies and beat them today, if they're all together, it gets really tough for us to win that battle if they're partnering together. And that's what this election is about, is what will America look like if we have a weak leader back in the White House like Kamala Harris?
And can we be protected from the invasion of China with this administration? No, we already know that Governor Walz is obsessed with China. He's lived there. His good grief, his wedding anniversary, he chose the massacre at Tiananmen Square, so it would be memorable. This is a man who idolizes the CCP, and I have a little bit different experience than the governor because I come from the manufacturing world, so I saw it from what they did to the manufacturing world, and I saw foundry after foundry after foundry close because the Chinese were coming in offering the lowest prices, and they were pirating all, same thing, stealing our technology. And I will tell you today There are not many people who come out of college and say, I would love to start a steel foundry. It's kind of a generational thing, sort of something that gets passed down, same as farms. When people come out of college, they don't say, man, I'd really like to start up a big dairy farm. It just doesn't happen today. They are generational businesses that get passed down from family to family, from father to son, from mother to daughter. These, once they're gone, they don't come back. No one starts them up again. And so when you hear her talking about food security and making sure that we have enough food to feed this country, what do you think the Chinese are doing buying up our land? They're weakening us. And a weak America cannot protect ourselves from a Chinese takeover. These are serious subjects. We're here, folks. The people who think this is way out in the future, this 100-year plan of China, we're on year like 85. They've already gotten this far. They have the largest navy in the world. A lot of people don't know that. China is very powerful. Our president decided to sit down and address the nation and tell the nation that he was stepping out of the presidential race. Didn't mention that he was doing it because he's cognitively declining. But he did announce that he was going to sit down and tell the world this. At the same time, China and Russia flew together off the coast of Alaska. First time they've ever flown together. It's here.
Well, good morning. You know, when we walked in this morning and we started worshiping, didn't you just feel the presence of the Lord land on this room and be with all of us? And Brian and I are so blessed to be with all of you this morning. We talk often about politics and government and the challenges that you run into and the divisiveness that we've seen in our country recently. And we always have talked about the purpose for why we serve and why we step up and do this job. You know, I always dreamed when I was a little girl that I'd just grow up and be a farmer and a rancher with my dad. He was my best friend. So the fact that I ended up doing what I do today is very strange. But the reason that we do what we do is because of our children and because of our grandchildren. We want to leave them a country that gives them just as many opportunities as we've had and been blessed with. So it's been incredible to be with all of you and to be a friend of Ralph's and this organization for so many years. I was thinking of the story that Speaker Johnson was just sharing, that old Indian chief that came to see General George Washington at that time, who was fighting when he was a colonel. He said he wanted to meet the man who was the particular favorite of heaven, who could not die in battle, which I felt on Saturday. We were at a moment in history watching what was happening to President Trump and what was happening at that rally. And when we were watching it, I felt this settling on the country, almost like we had been at this elevated level of conflict that all of a sudden we needed to see a peace that passes all understanding. When he stood on that stage and lifted his hand to reassure the crowd, I felt a peace, knowing that God was telling us, and he wanted to reassure the public. He wanted to reassure the people at the rally and the country that he was strong and that he was going to continue to fight and he would not be deterred. And that's what I think, at that moment in time, I remember thinking about the particular favorite of heaven, that there is a hand of God on President Trump. And Brian and I had the opportunity yesterday to spend a little time with him, visiting with him, and he said, I've always believed in God. I've always believed in the presence of God. But he said, you could tell he definitely in our conversation felt the hand of God in him in a new way that I think is going to be extremely powerful. South Dakota has done some incredible things, and I'm not going to run through all of the things that are going so well in our state, despite the headwinds that we face from the Democratic Party and from the Biden administration. The one thing I will tell you is that we're a small state. We are very proud that we took 4 of our founders and that we have them carved into the mountains in our state at Mount Rushmore, and we hosted President Trump there, if you remember, during the COVID pandemic, and gave that whole country, and I believe the world at that time, some optimism and some hope in remembering what our history was in this country and what we stand for and believe in. But we've also been a state that's been growing like crazy. People have been moving there by the thousands and thousands. They've been living in freedom. Our motto is under God, the people rule. and we follow the Constitution every single day with every decision. What I'm most proud about is that we've been so conservative, not only in how we've approached our regulations and our tax policy by doing the largest tax cut in South Dakota history, we've also embraced our conservative values. In fact, we've been an extremely conservative state in how we look at Christian lives and values. And in fact, last year, one of the things that we've always been celebrating is that in South Dakota, because we love babies so much, and because we love families so much, and because we protect life, our Department of Health did not have a single registered abortion in the entire state of South Dakota. We believe that we have been set forward to be an example to the nation, to do things first, that because we're small and because we're nimble, we can do things that other states can't do and lead the way our founders intended this country to be formed and to be run, with the power with the people speaking to their state and the federal government in its place. Now, make no mistake, there was a lot of discussion this morning about if Joe Biden's going to stay on the ticket or not at the top of the Democratic Party. He may not. But remember, no matter who they put at the top of that ticket, their policies are not going to change. Their agenda is not going to change. What their goals are for this country are not going to change. And what their agenda is will destroy American opportunity. It will destroy freedom and liberty. And that is the conversation that we need to continue to have, that it's not about Biden. It's about what this Democratic Party's new agenda is, that it has been the last 10 to 15 years, and what they're trying to do to remake America. One thing I want to ask you to do before I leave, because I'm not going to take much of Ralph's time, I know. He's a busy man, has lots of important people here to speak. But I want to tell you a story about when I was 13 years old. When I was about 13 years old, I was a very different, probably, individual. My mom and dad would have described me as someone who was very insecure. I couldn't look somebody directly in the eye. I couldn't speak in front of people. I was very chubby and felt like I had no gifts or talents to offer the world at all. In fact, my mom would tell you that she thought at that time she was very concerned about me and if I might be suicidal and how I thought of myself, and that she needed to intervene on my behalf. I remember one day she brought me to the kitchen table and sat me down at the kitchen table. And she opened up her Bible to Deuteronomy 28. And she started to talk to me not about how I saw myself, but how God saw me. She said, "Did you know that God sees you as the head and not the tail, above and not beneath?" And she started to speak scripture over me that I remember at that point in time thinking about myself in a new way. In fact, when she retold that story years later, she said, "It was like you changed immediately. Your perspective changed." She said, all of a sudden, you believed in yourself, and you didn't look at yourself at how your perspective was. You looked at how God saw you, and you saw the purpose and the gifts and the talents that he put into you. So that's what I want to leave you with today, is that we're not just called to go out and to work and to go out there and to argue our points and to be the smartest person in the room. We're out there to go win hearts and minds. We're out there to change people's perspectives of how they see themselves, how they see their families, how they see their lives. And we can do that with Scripture. We can do that by loving them. We can do that by spending time with them. But you can't do that without having conversation and talking and loving people. The one Scripture verse that got me through 2020 consistently, and it was amazing how many times I would walk into a building to meet with people, or I would walk into a press conference and see it sitting on a wall, or somebody would pass me a note, was in 2 Timothy, and it was that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And I remember telling myself over and over hundreds of times, Kristi, God has given you a sound mind. Make wise decisions, use discernment and everything. But above all, he's called us to love each other. We will win this election because people will know that we love them. That we love them, we have conversations with them, and when we speak to them and take the time to sit around a kitchen table with them and use Scripture to show them how God sees them, what their purpose is, and how they were created, everything will change. The revival we've been praying for years will come. It will be here. If you do that and you remember how God sees people, not how they see each other, not how they see their neighbors, not the ugliness that we've lived through the last several years, but how God sees them and what his purpose is for this nation. This is a great nation founded by people who loved the Lord and put all their faith and trust in him. In fact, Ben Franklin even said back during those times, he said, surely we must all hang together or we shall all hang separately. We will hang together because we put our trust in the Lord. God bless you. You have a wonderful day.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I almost ran you over.
How are you?
Good. Look at all that. Are you going to say all that?
Well, I think I'll let you say it.
I don't know if I'm even going to say all that.
I'm just going to stand here.
Are you?
If that's okay. You can see yourself there.
We ready?
We're ready.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this bill signing. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the state of South Dakota and our national security interests. Today, we are signing into law House Bill 1231. It is a bill that would ensure that we have evil countries who hate America not purchasing our farmland in the state of South Dakota. It's a bill we've worked on for 2 years. This year, I think we have fantastic agreement, not just with those in our ag community, but also our business community and our neighborhoods that recognize that we need to protect our interests here in this state and make sure that we are protecting our national security interests. You've heard me speak several times about the importance of Ellsworth Air Force Base, how important it is to our nation's security that we are going to be the home of the B-21s, which will be the next generation bomber that will protect this country for the next 50 years. And it's important that we know who the neighbors are there because China is aggressively purchasing up land and purchasing up properties close to our strategic national areas that will house our greatest weapons, and we're going to ensure that in South Dakota that never happens. Also for me, this is the 30th year that I have worked on ag policy. So I know I look much younger than I am, but for 30 years I've been working on ag policy, and I have watched over those 30 years China come into our country. Every day our federal government overspends and we borrow money. We sell our treasury bonds, and we sell them to China just to operate our federal government. I've watched them purchase our fertilizer companies. They have purchased our chemical companies. They have purchased our genetics and stolen our IP. They manipulate their currency. Their goal is to dominate the world, and the way they do that is by taking out America. Now we have seen in recent years them increase their purchases of farmland in this country by over 5,300%. So they are a real threat to America, and here in South Dakota, because we recognize how strategically we are placed, the importance that we have in the weapon systems that will protect this country far into the future, that we're taking that seriously and signing a bill like this into law. I want to thank the sponsors that have put a lot of time into this, bringing together agreement on this bill and the language. Senator Tobin's been fantastic. Representative Wangsness has done excellent work. And I also want to make sure that I thank Leader Mortensen for his work as well, because he's done a great job educating people on really what this bill does and how we're going to make sure that agriculture has the tools that it needs and that it is going to be able to be successful and be our #1 industry, but we also can be wise in what we do here with the assets that we've been entrusted with. So today, I am going to sign into law. We're going to stick around because we're going to take some pictures afterwards too. But first, House Bill 1231, it's an act to place restrictions on the ownership of agricultural land. And today is the 4th of March, sorry. Time flies. Congratulations. Good job. And Leader, I brought you one too.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your help. Appreciate it. Now we're gonna take some pictures though, so I need one of the pens back.
There you go.
So I can pretend I was, you can say it was actually your pen that I was holding. How's that sound? We will look at AJ. And now we will look down and pretend I'm signing it now, so you all can look at the paper. Good. Well, thank you, everybody. All right, you better get to caucus. Oh, here you go. There you go. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
We have built roads, bridges, dams, and even a railroad. Who builds railroads anymore? South Dakota does. We do. We put high-speed internet access across the entire state. We have the highest birth rate in the nation. People have hope. People are having babies, and I love it. We do not have an income tax. We have no personal property tax. And last year we passed the largest tax cut in our state's history by lowering our sales tax to 4.2%. Now, we are one of the few states whose suicide rates and our mental health challenges are going down. And we have the lowest drop in overdoses the last couple of years as well. What does all this say? This says that our people are happier. And they're happier because they're free. Leadership matters. I'm just going to say it. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they suck. And, to be honest with you, we shouldn't look to Congress for the answers either. The gridlock on Capitol Hill is not going to break in time to save America. We need a president who will. And I have always believed and supported the fact that our next president needs to be President Trump.
South Dakota respects the freedom to farm and to ranch. That freedom should not extend to our enemies, which leads us to number 7, the freedom to be secure. One of the biggest reasons that we can't allow America's adversaries like China to own South Dakota ag land is because Ellsworth Air Force Base is going to soon be the home of the next generation bomber. It will keep America safe for decades to come. The B-21 Raider took its first test flight just 2 months ago, and our enemies are going to do everything that they can to get intelligence on that bomber. It is our duty to do what we must do here in South Dakota to ensure that they fail and that we succeed at keeping America safe. Sometimes keeping people safe means that we need to extend our efforts beyond South Dakota. The Biden administration's failures at the border have been so well documented that I don't need to talk about them in great length here. For the third time in less than 3 years, South Dakota National Guard troops have gone there to help. When I was there with our soldiers at the border, I saw the inhumanity of Biden's failed policies. Until those policies change, the lack of security.
I'm here today to let you know that 2024 should not be a year where we get hung up on party politics, where one-issue disagreements, or picking our leaders based on how long they've been in the U.S. Senate, or how many speeches they give each year. This election, the choice is clear. There are 2 kinds of people in this country right now. There are people who love America, and there are those who hate America. Those who hate America are working every day to destroy it. And let's be clear, Joe Biden is destroying America and taking away your freedoms. We can't just sit around complaining about it anymore. We need to do more. I was recently asked an interesting question by a group that I had the chance to speak to. It was a leadership class, and they asked me a question from the audience and said, Governor Noem, how do you make your hard decisions? And I thought about it for a minute, and then I just said, you know what? It isn't hard. It's easy, because I know the foundation that I need to start from with every single decision that I make as governor. I went on to tell them a little bit about how when I first started to run for governor of our state, it was clear that it was going to be a very different race than I had ever run before. It was showing up in my polling that it was going to be an issue that I was a woman. Now, South Dakota had seen women lead before, of course, in business and in our state legislature and in Congress, but we had never had a female governor before. We'd never had a woman as the CEO of our state. It was a new idea. Now, I had spent my entire life in a man's world. I loved my dad. He was my best friend. I spent my days in the tractor, chasing cows, going on hunting trips with him. I was usually one of the very few women driving semis, hauling grain, showing up at farm policy meetings, serving in leadership in our state legislature, and even during my time in Congress, I was one of just a couple of women on the leadership team making decisions on policy there. It was normal for me to be one of the few women in the room, and it was nothing out of the ordinary. But I remember the day that I was actually being sworn in to office as the first female governor of South Dakota. And much of that ceremony that day was dedicated to the historical nature of that event. I was being sworn in to office on the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote in our state for the first time. And as the ceremony went on and the speakers continued to point out the significance of this 100-year anniversary and me taking the oath of office, it really started to hit me. For the first time, I thought to myself, wow, this is kind of a big deal. I looked around the Capitol Rotunda and I saw it filled with hundreds and hundreds of people, but for the first time I started to notice all of the little girls in the room and all the women, and I realized that this really was going to be a part of history. They were getting to see somebody who looked like them take on a very different role. For the first time, I started to get nervous, and I thought to myself, I better not screw this up. As I stepped up to be sworn in by our Chief Justice of our Supreme Court, placed my hand on my dad's Bible, and I raised my right hand, I realized that I was only making two promises to the people of South Dakota. I was promising to uphold the Constitution of the great state of South Dakota and to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. Two promises. I can do that. So from that moment on, every decision that I make starts with asking the questions, is this constitutional? Do I have this authority as governor? What authority do I not have? What is the responsibility of the people? I think all of you know a little bit about the decisions that I've made as governor of our state. The last several years, we saw government leaders in other states use fear to control people. They used fear to promote their agenda of socialism and control. Now, that has not been our story in South Dakota. They took away, in other places, people's freedom of assembly. They took away their freedom of religion and their freedom of speech. And now they are threatening our state's rights to protect our people. Now, I was the only governor in this country who never...
The real power granted to us by our Constitution is to the people, and it's given from God. That's where it comes from. So we've got a very weak president in the White House right now. He's a bumbling, weak, old man. I'm not sure if he can complete even daily activities and remember what he did that day. And when he is in the White House, we have extreme challenges. Russia invades its neighbors. China takes advantage of us all around the world. We have incredible dangers. Israel gets attacked. When you put President Trump back in the White House, peace deals get signed in the Middle East. The economy thrives. We take advantage of China. And America is respected again. That's what happens when President Trump comes back. Peace through strength. Peace through strength is what he brings. I'll give you an example. I was in Wisconsin recently doing some events for President Trump, talking to women and independents and different groups of people, asking them to get engaged and to think about this next election cycle. And I was talking with Kevin. Kevin was the youngest person to be held hostage by Iran back in the 80s when Jimmy Carter was president. Kevin and the rest of those Americans were held hostage by Iran for 444 days while Jimmy Carter negotiated. They were released on the day Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. That's what peace through strength is. That's what peace through strength is. Jimmy Carter was a weak president, and Iran recognized immediately that Ronald Reagan wasn't going to put up with it anymore. Joe Biden is a weak president, and all of our enemies, foreign and domestic, are going to recognize that when Trump gets back in the White House, that he's not going to put up with it anymore either. He will give us economic strength, a secure border. He will make sure that we end political prosecutions, which we see across this country, and he will bring law and order back to our streets. That's what President Trump will deliver for us. So if you're sitting here and you're struggling to have sustained optimism, if you turn on the news at night and you get discouraged, I'm going to remind you of something. A lot of you in this audience are very young. You've got more of your life ahead of you than you have in your past behind you in the rearview mirror. At the founding of our country, when our founders decided, and those colonists decided to fight against the British Army and to take our freedoms for us and to write a Declaration of Independence, I want you to really think what they were doing. They were taking on the strongest military in the entire world. And they were doing it at a very young age. In fact, George Washington at the time was only 44 years old. John Adams was 40. Thomas Jefferson was 33 years old, and he wrote the Declaration of Independence at the age of 33. James Madison was 25 years old, and Alexander Hamilton was just 19. It's incredible, isn't it, that our founders were that young when they were able to create this country. Now, they were taking on the strongest military in the world, and those colonists went and picked up their personal hunting rifles and their muskets and decided to go fight for freedom. Now, they can do that. We can do what we have to do this election cycle, can't we?
Good afternoon. It is so wonderful to be with all of you, and I am going to be back tonight to share with you, but I had a few minutes here. I wanted to come share a fun story with you. Is that okay? I figured you would be up for it. Listen, I remember back in 2016, I turned on the TV. I was working in my office at our family's business, and all of a sudden, this man was announcing he was going to run for president of the United States. And he was coming down a golden escalator. And I remember standing there watching and thinking, who does that? At that time, I was in South Dakota, and I was serving in Congress, and I was thinking, normally, a typical politician, when they're going to announce that they're going to run for office, what do? They go out and they maybe find themselves a hay bale or a barn, put on a pair of jeans or a hard hat or something, and say, golly shucks, geez, I'm just like you, and I want to be like you and go work for you, but they don't really mean it, do they? They don't really mean it. They really think that they're going to go there and bamboozle you into thinking there's something that they're not, and that they're going to go out there and work for you, but they really secretly think that they know better than you. Well, that's not President Donald J. Trump. What does he do? He comes down a golden escalator and says he's going to run for president of the United States. And I remember thinking at the time in South Dakota, I think we only have 2 escalators in our entire state of South Dakota. And I think they're in our airports. So there's not much that the people of South Dakota can relate to on a day-to-day basis of going down escalators. But what he was telling us as Americans was that he was going to be exactly who he was, that he was going to be honest, that he was going to be genuine, and that he was going to fix this country and help make America great again. That's exactly what President Trump was telling us, and exactly what he has done when he's had the opportunity to lead us through incredibly challenging times. As governor, I'm going to tell you some stories tonight about serving as governor under President Trump and serving as governor under President Biden. And let me tell you, it's been like 2 different worlds. Every day when President Trump was in the White House, I got to be on offense. I got to go out and solve problems. I was raised by a dad who was a cowboy who said, we don't complain about things, we fix them. But since President Biden has been in the White House, I have been on defense. I spend more time fighting for my people's freedoms and their liberties than you'd ever believe. And I will tell you one thing, God is good. And God is still on the throne, and God is going to give us back President Donald J. Trump in the White House to lead this country to greatness. I'm going to encourage you. One of the scripture verses that is my favorite, it used to be a worship song, but it was talked about how lovely are the feet of them that bring good news. Proclaiming peace and announcing news of happiness, our God reigns. Our God reigns. Be people of happiness. Be people so lovely that people are excited to see your feet coming to bring the good news to them. We need to focus on winning the hearts and minds of people again. We're right on our policies. We're right on our values. We're right on the Bible and where we believe and we pull all of our convictions from. We just need to win their hearts and minds back so we make sure we have the right leadership back in the White House. I'll see you tonight. Make sure you show up because it's going to be really good. I'm going to be better than I've ever been before. You do not want to miss it, all right? We'll see you. God bless you all.
Yes.
I'm in the tourism industry.
Yeah.
my people pay 4.2 whatever.
Yep,
And then they pay a tourism tax.
yep.
We have $4 billion according to the revenue in tourist income. Why are we not increasing the tourism tax to help offset some of that? And then also when you're talking about a 73-year retiree, our property taxes are out of control. There is no consistency. And there are people in this room that voted it down. He's over there somewhere. And I'm sorry. My taxes have got quadrupled in 3 years.
Is this your home?
This is my
Yeah.
home. Well, it's my home. It's my business.
Oh, no, but some people, yeah, okay.
It's everything is going up. Property taxes are going up. Homeowners insurance, car insurance, everything's going up. And yet we want to bring down taxes. Well, I understand needing to balance things, but we are not looking at the big picture. We could be increasing the tourism tax. We are 9th from the bottom in sales tax in the nation at 4 point whatever until July. The highest in the nation is like 7 point whatever. 8, yeah. Most people around the nation, even when they come to visit us, are expecting at least 8% sales tax. Yeah, they get here and they're like, oh my gosh, look how cheap everything is. Well, if you charged a tourism tax, even a 1% increase would net you $40 million.
Can you all hear everything she's saying? Oh, good job. Okay, good.
Sorry,
I'm making sure they're getting to hear everything you say.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we have options. We're not looking at those options. And as far as property taxes, I get that things are going up and we have people coming in, but maybe we should be having the new people that come in and buy a house and they're paying ridiculous amounts of money, and there are people doing that. They have to submit something and their taxes get assessed at that new grayer rate. But we have people in our neighborhood that went from $290,000 in valuations up to over 400 some in 3 years.
And now,
How-
800.
Yeah.
800.
And you could make it so the people that as soon as you sell your house, yeah, that next person's gonna realize that higher tax bracket. But for the people that want to retire here, there was an article in a paper where Hill City was upset that they couldn't get people to come into Hill City to retire. Who's going to come into a state that has property taxes out of control? They're not consistent. It's a mess, and we're told we live in a better neighborhood, so we're going to pay higher than them. What is that about? We collectively,
Custer.
Yeah.
you know, we collectively work hard.
You guys drove all the way up here from Custer? Well, I'll just say a couple of things. So I'm not the person that's gonna stand here and advocate for higher taxes. So, when you talk about raising the tourism tax, what's happening so much in the state right now is that all the cities are raising their bed and board and booze taxes. They're all raising what it costs if you rent a hotel room, what it costs if you're gonna go stay there. If you look at a bill, if you go stay somewhere, so all those tourists that are coming in, they are spending more money. And we had a big problem out here in the Black Hills during high tourist season, where we had hotels that were charging 2 or 3 times the rate of what they normally do because they knew that they could. So we've gotta stop that. We've gotta stop we're punishing people who wanna come in here and visit and spend their money, because tourism is our second largest industry. So it's important that these businesses, these coffee shops and main streets, that we do have people who come and visit, and we don't mind that some of them go home. Because, you know, we talked to them a while and we're like, okay, you don't qualify, but that's the problem when you start talking about raising the tourism tax, is that you look at those people who do come in as tourists, all these cities are taking more taxes, and that all adds up, and we're looking at how bad it's really hitting them and trying to evaluate that. When it comes to property taxes, you are exactly right that we have a problem going on. The first bill that I worked on when I became a legislator in 2006 was property taxes, and spent a whole session working on it, and it was because farmers were being taxed off their land at that time. And we moved to a productivity model that still isn't right, and that's why there's a task force that still continues to adjust it. But we didn't want farmers to be taxed on what something would sell for, because it was taxing them off their land. Instead, it was on what it could produce. So I do know that legislators are working on what would be a way to reform property taxes in a way that would be much more fair,
and that wouldn't create these kind of escalations that we're seeing. But you all, it's good to know for discussion, these legislators are not going out and not changing property taxes because they're keeping a bunch of money at the state that they can sell. All your property taxes do stay local. They all go to your schools and they all go to your counties. So the state doesn't get a dime of property taxes. So one thing that might be helpful is not just talking to legislators, but talk to your county commissioners and your assessors, and go out there and talk to your school districts, because your school districts have hundreds of lobbyists in the Capitol every year asking for more and more money all the time. And it'd be so fantastic if a bunch of parents and community members would show up at a school board meeting once in a while and ask some questions. Because that's the one thing that I would love to do, and I've been wanting to do for years, is to have school board members really be trained on what their job is. Because I love school board members. It's probably one of the worst jobs ever, is to be a school board member. So I get it. But they don't really understand that their job is not just to go there and listen to the administrator. That your job is to be a school board member that asks questions, finds out how the money's being spent. Should we be spending $500,000 on a brand new bus when we're paying our teacher $32,000 a year? I don't know. Maybe we should figure out a way that we can advocate for making sure that people that actually send their kids to our school aren't being taxed so much, and we could come together unified to the legislature and say, this is something that we think works and that we're willing to do to help our community be successful. Nobody's done that. All they've done is point fingers at these legislators and say, fix it, but all the people on the take are right here in your community. So go talk to your school districts and go talk to your county commissioners. And your counties come every year and ask for more and more money from the state. And I love my counties, and I want my roads and bridges to be great and all of that, but they're getting the property taxes, and then they come to the state and they ask for more and more money too. I would ask them, just prove to me that you're spending what I give you wisely. Amen. That you're spending it wisely and you're spending it on contractors that are actually building a bridge that lasts more than 5 years. Or how many of you have seen a brand new road get built and 2 years later it's all broke up, but you're trying to figure out how that guy get that contract? Right? I can't ask all those questions by myself. I would love to. I don't sleep very much right now. My staff wishes I would, because they get really tired of me texting them at 3 in the morning. But that's, I think that part of your focus and frustration on legislators sometimes, is okay to keep, they're well aware, they bring their concerns to me. But boy, if you had counties and schools and people who live here all coming up there and saying, we gotta fix this, and here's some proposals. Remember, these guys don't have staff. They don't have any staff. They don't have people that can go out and talk to assessors and spend hours and hours in county courthouses gathering all that information and figuring all that out. Help them out a little bit. I think that'd be fantastic, and we'd be all on board. And because there's nothing that you said that I disagree with. Not a single thing. You're exactly right. It has to be fixed, but it's not going to get fixed if we keep fighting with each other. We've got to figure that out. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go.
Good evening. You all look fantastic. I love the cowboy hats. And a shout out to South Dakota. Hi. Woo. Listen, I'm Governor Kristi Noem from the great state of South Dakota. Leadership has consequences. It matters who's in the White House. Now, I've been governor under both President Trump and Joe Biden. And people ask me all the time, what's the biggest difference? And I tell them that President Trump honored the Constitution. He let me do my job. And he let me keep my people free. Now, leadership on the state level, it matters too. It certainly mattered in South Dakota. I am so proud to say that South Dakota's strong economy has been a beacon of freedom for America. Most of you probably first heard about me during COVID, didn't you? Because South Dakota was the only state in the country that stayed open for business. We didn't mandate anything. We never ordered a single business or a church to close. I never even defined what an essential business was because I don't believe that the government has the authority to tell you that your business isn't essential. When other states were pushing mandates and lockdowns, instead in South Dakota, we hit the gas. We embraced liberty. We told our story and we invited people to come and to enjoy our beautiful state. Now, all of the things that conservatives have always talked about, we just did it, and it worked. Our economy took off, and since I've been governor, we broke the national record for the lowest unemployment rate in American history at 1.8%. In South Dakota, everybody works. We paid off state debts and bonds. We fixed dams and bridges. We built roads. We have a fully funded pension plan and a AAA credit rating. We broke records for surpluses, and we balance our budget every single year. And last year in South Dakota, we passed the largest tax cut in South Dakota history. Under my administration, incomes in our state have gone up 36%. Women-owned businesses are thriving. We also have the highest birth rate in the nation. People are having babies because they're happy. And in South Dakota, we love babies. Our mental health challenges have gone down, our suicide rates are declining, and we are the #1 state in the country for a decline in overdoses because people have hope. We're growing so fast that we needed more workers to catch up. So we launched the most successful workforce recruitment campaign in the history of South Dakota. And they have come by the thousands to join us and to live with us. Do you guys remember those ads when I was a really lousy plumber and a really terrible electrician? Do you remember those? Well, since we started those ads, we have seen a 78% increase in licensed plumbers in the state of South Dakota. We've seen a 44% increase in electricians in our state. Now, people aren't moving to South Dakota for our beaches or for our beautiful January weather. They are moving to our state for opportunity and for freedom. And all of this happened because our people were bold. We took action, and I was strong. Now, South Dakota proved that freedom will make America wealthy again. And with President Trump in the White House, with Senator J.D. Vance by his side, we will prove it across America. Listen, 2 days ago, the whole world changed. Evil displayed itself in the very worst way, through a cowardly act. An innocent American lost his life, and we will continue to lift his family up in our prayers every single day. Prior to this week, we already knew that President Donald Trump was a fighter. He is the toughest man that I have ever met. Nobody has endured more than what he has gone through. They've attacked his reputation, they impeached him, they tried to bankrupt him, and they unjustly prosecuted him. But even in the most perilous moment this week, his instinct was to stand and to fight. Donald J. Trump is our man in the arena. He will never stop fighting for us. He will never stop, and now he is bringing all of us together. Now, I know that many of you are angry, but now is the time to unite. and we have to get to work. We have to win the hearts and minds of every single American, wake them up with truth and with wisdom. We need to listen to them. You can't win people over by arguing with them. Visit with your neighbors, at your job, at your church, at the gas station, or even at the grocery store. Listen, there are moments in our history, often after great hardship and tragedy, when true leaders unite our country. At one time, President Lincoln, he united our country. He delivered my favorite presidential address of all time. In fact, it's the only speech or poem or song that I ever made my kids memorize when they were young, when they were little. It was the Gettysburg Address, and it was delivered during our nation's bloodiest conflict. That speech so inspired people that they continued to fight for years, and they lost loved ones in order to preserve this union we call the United States of America. Now, at that time, President Lincoln encouraged us to take increased devotion, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. Like Lincoln, in the midst of our pain and division, Donald Trump is calling us to be touched by the better angels of our nature. As Paul wrote in 2 Timothy, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. We must not be afraid. Even in our darkest days, we have never once given up hope. So don't quit on America. If we lose this country, where else will we go that provides more freedom and opportunity for our kids and our grandkids? And I've got 3 grandkids, and I'm counting on a whole lot more. And yes, democracy can be messy, but there is a great invisible strength to a people's union. We have shown the world that we can endure sacrifice and that we can still unite. We should still aspire to be worthy of this union, America. President Donald J. Trump is the leader we need for such a time as this. So now, I need you to get to work. Get out there, go do it. Don't quit. Keep fighting, keep uniting, keep talking to people, win the hearts and minds, and may God bless you, and may God continue to bless the great United States of America. Thank you.
It's not about governors and senators and all these government officials. It's certainly not about Fauci. It's not about Nancy Pelosi. And dear Lord, we all know Joe Biden sucks, right? We're pretty clear on that. Absolutely. It's about the people. In South Dakota, our motto is under God, the people rule. I love that motto. It reminds me every day about what my job is. It's not to be the people decide. And we get our rights from God. We get our rights from God. So while the whole world was losing its mind during COVID and falling apart and slamming the door shut and locking people in their homes, South Dakota made a very different choice. We ended up being the only state in the country that never once closed a single business. We never mandated any masks or vaccines. Never even defined what an essential business was, because I don't believe the government has the ability or the authority to tell you that your business isn't essential. We're the only state in the entire country that didn't take the elevated unemployment benefits. We said, thank you, Mr. President, for the flexibility, but our people want to work. And they did. They worked the entire time. Saw those riots and violence happening across the country, tearing down our monuments, our history and statues. Instead, South Dakota, we did a national advertising campaign saying, come to South Dakota. And specifically to our law enforcement officers, we said, if you want to be respected, come to our state. We'll wrap our arms around your families. That very first week, 300 law enforcement officers say, we want to come to South Dakota in 1 week and move there with their families to be a part of our whole life. So where are we today? Today, South Dakota is thriving. We are growing like crazy. Hundreds of businesses have moved to our state. Thousands of people have moved to our state. We have a AAA credit rating. We have a fully funded pension plan. We've had historic revenues. We paid off all of our debts and our technical schools and our universities. We've built roads, bridges, and dams and railroads. We have put more money into reserves than we've ever had before. Incomes have gone up over 30% since I've been governor in our state. People have more money in their pockets. And remember, in South Dakota, we don't have an income tax. We don't have a personal property tax. All we have is a 4.2% sales tax, and last year, we made the largest tax cut in South Dakota history and gave more money back to the people because it's their money, it's not the government's money.
Hi everyone. You may have seen the news recently that some of our tribal leaders are upset with me because I told the truth about the Mexican drug cartel's activity on our reservations. It's true, there are dangerous cartels in South Dakota, and they're instigating drug addiction, committing murder, rape, human trafficking, and so much more. Because of this, I called on all of our tribal leaders to banish these cartels from tribal lands. Instead, some are choosing to banish me. Now that doesn't solve any of our problems. By working with me, we can protect our people and our communities. We could sign law enforcement agreements where we uphold tribal sovereignty. Also,
These countries are infiltrating us to destroy us, and they're doing it from the inside. Now, I saw this coming. I was the first governor in the country to ban TikTok for state government devices. I know how China is using that app to collect our data, to spy on our people, and to manipulate our opinions and our ideas. Since then, dozens of states and even the federal government followed my lead and took action. Apparently, Joe Biden gets a pass for his campaign, but whatever, Joe. We need to face the facts. Joe Biden is not fit to be president, and Kamala is no backup plan. They have facilitated communist policies, socialist programs into our American democracy. It is not the government's job to simply do everything for people. It is the job of the government to empower people to do things for themselves.
Texas should stand their ground. They should enforce their state law and go back to the constitutional rights that they've been granted to protect their state sovereignty. And that's what so many of us as governors are offended by, is that Democrats were threatening to encourage the president to activate our guards in order to get them to stand down and not protect our state. So it is a dangerous situation. It is a war zone at our southern border. I'm so proud of what Texas has done, proud to stand with them. I've deployed my National Guard down there 3 separate times already, and we'll do what we can to help them support and defend their people. It is the inhumanity of the policies that are happening right now is pretty striking, Dana. I mean, you see women suffering, the drug trafficking, the human trafficking that is happening because of these open border policies. It's inhumane and it needs to stop. You have the Texas Department of Public Safety that is pulling people out of the river, giving them CPR, bringing them back to life because the cartels are forcing them across that river. I talked to one mother who had just gotten into the United States and had been taken into custody by National Guard and also by Border Patrol. But she had been in Nicaragua, had been told that America is open, please come. She brought her daughter, her 6-year-old daughter, and was facilitated through by cartels, and said where she was so mistreated was in Mexico. That she sat in Mexico for 3 months and was put through horrific work conditions and terrible conditions for her and her daughter for 3 months before they then brought her across the river and forced her across into a dangerous situation. So
The people that I see saving lives down there is the Texas National Guard, the Texas Border Patrol. I'll tell you, the Border Patrol that works for this federal government doesn't approve of Joe Biden's policies. The people in this country don't. Nobody thinks that what's happening at the border is the right thing to do, and they know that the president has the legal authority now to take action. He could stop this today. He doesn't need to wait for a bill to pass Congress. He doesn't need to wait for this bad bill to be codified, which it shouldn't be. This President Biden, could take action today. Well, that's why I went to the border on Friday. I went there to see with my own eyes what was going on, and recognizing that I am, as governor of South Dakota, I'm commander-in-chief of my National Guard. That's a heavy responsibility that sits on our shoulders. We have the same responsibility for those families and those soldiers that the president should feel for our military and how he engages them. So we don't know where this will escalate. We don't know what the president will do. We don't know how he'll try to manipulate our soldiers, and if he will even defend our country from this invasion that is happening. So that's why I went there. I'm all in to protect our state sovereignty. I deal every day, Dana, in South Dakota with the effects of this open border. We have those Mexican cartels that have a presence on my 9 tribal reservations, where those communities are suffering from the drug trafficking and the human trafficking that's going through my tribal reservations, where I don't have any jurisdiction. I can't go there and help bring peace to their community. I can't help protect them from these Mexican cartels, and they are literally in South Dakota facilitating unrest. I am concerned about violence because people in South Dakota live with violence every single day. They're incredible crimes, and my tribes have asked, well, first of all, what I do as governor is I start looking at the long-range effects of every single decision and what I'm prepared to do. So that's why I went to the border on Friday, was to look at, there could be a violent situation, but there also could be areas where we need to take legal action as governors to protect our states. I'm willing to put all of that on the table to make sure that we're protecting the freedoms that we've always had ever since this country was founded. That's my responsibility and why I get up every single day. Why doesn't President Biden take action today? I mean, today can be day one. He can immediately announce that he's reinstating the stay in Mexico policy. He can immediately announce that he's going to refocus on building a wall. He can do those today. I listened to Nancy Pelosi talk earlier. She's been in Congress for decades and has talked about immigration for decades. And what has she accomplished? We have a president that has all the tools that he needs to protect our country today, and he's refusing to do that. So to look at Congress and expect them to pass a bill when they failed for decades to do this, and then to say we have to accept this poison pill of a bill that it essentially codifies illegal immigration. What it would do is put into statute that people can now come here illegally, and is just a terrible bill that I think President Trump is exactly right. It should not pass, and push President Biden to take action, because he has all the federal laws that he needs today to keep us safe, to stop the drugs that are coming into this country and killing us. We have children dying every day from fentanyl poisoning. We have children every single day that are being trafficked, and President Biden can take action and stop it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to be with all of you today, and thank you, Congressman, for that very kind introduction. You are a wonderful friend, and you're doing such a great job, maybe because you stole half of my staff and kept them when I left the Hill. No, but you're a wonderful representative for South Dakota. Thank you for caring so passionately for all of our people. You know, Chairman Thompson, I also have the honor of having one of my former chairmen on this committee sit in front of me today. Chairman Lucas was my chairman as I served here in the House of Representatives and had the chance to do 2 farm bills, but serving under his leadership on this committee was a special honor for me, and I loved being a member of his team as we put together farm policy, which I always refer to as food policy for the United States of America. So it's wonderful to see you again, Chairman Lucas, and I look forward to continuing to receive your advice and wisdom over the years. Ranking Member Scott and members of the committee, thank you so much for letting me be here with you today to discuss this topic. As a former member of this committee, I know it very well, that each day that you protect not only our nation's food supply, but you also are stewards of our land. And it is a treasure for us to be able to do that each and every day. I come before you today and sit as the 33rd governor of South Dakota. My home state is known for its gorgeous Black Hills, its rolling plains, but also iconic Mount Rushmore. We have a lot to be proud of, and if you haven't come to visit us, you probably should, because it is beautiful. Agriculture is our #1 industry in our state, but tourism is our second largest industry. It's incredibly important to our people that our land stay in good shape and we continue to produce. This year is special to me because this is the 30th year that I have worked on agriculture policy. I have spent my lifetime working on policy, not just being a farmer and a rancher and raising my family on the land, but also being involved in meetings. At just the age of 22, my dad was killed in an accident on our family farm, and I got angry when I found out how our family was going to be hit tragically by the death tax. I started showing up at meetings to talk about policy and how it impacted small farms. At that time, the U.S. Senate Majority Leader was Tom Daschle, who was a Democrat. And I ended up him appointing me to serve on the Farm Service Agency State Committee, which is the committee that oversees all the federal farm programs in the state of South Dakota. I did that for many years as a young wife and mother, and also as a farmer and rancher running a large operation in our state. So I was heavily involved in the implementation of federal farm programs in our state, making sure they worked for all of our ranchers there and that they were as flexible as possible to give them the freedom to choose how they ran their farms and to do it very well. I also served on many different commissions and task forces out here in Washington, D.C. during those years to help disadvantaged farmers, people that were in tough situations and different critical situations. And as the general manager of our business operations, I ran our farm for many decades. I was first elected to our state legislature in 2006 and became the assistant majority leader in the House. While there, I rewrote our agriculture property tax system. I ended up running for Congress, was elected, served on this committee, and we worked on 2 farm bills while I served on this committee, also served on natural resources, on the Armed Services Committee, Education and Workforce Committee, and then ended on Ways and Means Committee when we did tax reform, and was very proud to see that signed into law. In 2018, when I ran for governor in our state, and I won and then was reelected again last year, or in 2022, and I'm in my second term now. I tell you all of this because I think it's important for you to know that my heart is with the land and it is with our people, but when it comes to policy, that I know what I'm talking about. And I know it because I live it. Today, our focus of this committee is the danger that China poses to American agriculture. Over the years, I have witnessed this hostile communist country work to systematically take over our food supply chain. They have decades ago started buying our fertilizer companies, controlling our ability to access fertilizer, bring it into the United States. Then I watched them buy up our chemical companies as I worked on implementation of programs and policies at our state level and at the federal level. I watched us as we sold citizenship to Chinese communist members of the Communist Party for investment into our processing systems. And now most of our processing facilities are owned by the Communist Party or Chinese government. Now they are coming for our land. And when they buy up our land, they will complete their chain of control of our food supply. Between 2010 and 2020, the Chinese Communist Party's holdings of ag land increased by 5,300%. Reports now show that China owns about 384,000 acres of U.S. ag land, valued at over $2 billion. This should be alarming to all of us. USDA admits that this may not even account for all of the land that they own because there's very little track of foreign interests that are involved in these large transactions. In fact, there's very little reporting that happens at the state or the federal level, and little consequences for allowing countries who hate us from owning our land. Just this past summer, we had members of the Communist Party contact our state government and want to come and visit to our processing facilities, see our farms, and visit South Dakota. We declined all of those meetings, but just within days we received a phone call from the State Department telling us that those were Chinese spies. They were there to steal our intellectual property, to steal our genetics, and wanted to debrief us if we had met with them. Thank God we did not. We were told they were there to help improve our trade relations, that they were there to improve our business and our exports, and instead they were there to steal from the United States of America. So the threat is very real to us every single day, what China is doing, and they have a 1,000-year plan to become the world dominating power in the world, and the only thing standing in their way is America. Just this past summer, it was very clear to me when those Chinese spies were in our state that China wants to control us, and they want to do that by controlling our food supply. The Chinese Communist Party is not our friend. They're not our partner, and they're not our ally. They're our enemy. and they're a rapidly expanding national security threat that can't be ignored. So let me be clear. They are buying up our entire food supply chain, and when America can't feed itself and we rely on other members of another country to feed us, it becomes a national security issue. The country that feeds us will control us. And let me remind you why we do a farm bill every year. And I'm well aware that you have a priority to get that done, and I'm looking forward to getting a farm bill done, because that is the safety net for our farmers out there. In the past, the farm bill has always been a bipartisan issue, and it should continue to be a bipartisan issue. I had the opportunity to work on 2 of them, and it is simply a safety net for our farmers. It is important, and America decided years ago that we needed to have a farm bill to ensure that every family in this country had a safe and had an affordable food supply, that they had the ability to go to a grocery store and to put food on the table for their families, and that if a farmer had a good year, he could pay his bills, but if he had a bad year, he could lose everything. And we didn't want to have a drought or a flood or something happen that caused us to lose all of our small family farms and allow us to lose the ability to feed ourselves. Every family in this country recognizes the importance of a farm bill. I know you do too, and I'm looking forward to you getting one completed to make sure that we continue to feed ourselves in this country. The farm bill should be designed to help farmers and not environmental extremists. I hope that you'll continue to focus on making sure that we are working as a conservationist myself. I'm committed to protecting the abundance of our natural resources in my state, but so-called climate-smart agriculture dictated by the Biden administration does not help farmers, and it does not help us put food on the table or conserve our natural resources. We want wildlife habitat solutions that meets the needs of the people and the states that best serve this country and our ability to feed ourselves and protect ourselves. The Farm Bill manages risk, and it is a safety net, and I hope that you can get that done. Recent media reports show that the largest Chinese holder of American ag land is shipping food and medical supplies to China to be stockpiled by the Chinese military. We all saw when China purchased land in North Dakota that they claimed was for a corn processing plant, that there wasn't going to be enough corn in that area to supply that plant, and that it was just miles from a military installation. They were purchasing that land on purpose for national security reasons, and that is why I've made it a priority in my state to ensure that that doesn't happen on my watch. In South Dakota, we worked for 2 years to make sure that we had a bill in place that would make sure we know who's buying our land and that it wasn't going to be from a country that hated us. China would never allow us to go to their country and buy land in their country. They don't even allow their own people to buy their land. There's no reason we should allow them to come into our country and buy our land, and especially not close to our military installations. South Dakota is the home to Ellsworth Air Force Base. It's the home of the B-1 bomber that has protected this country for the last 50 years. It's also home to the MQ-9 Reaper drones, which are in operation protecting us as well. But it will be the first home of the B-21s, which will be the bombing platform that will protect this country for the next 50 years. And it's incredibly important that we stop China and that we make sure other evil foreign governments don't come in and have the opportunity to buy up land next to these military installations. When we talk about food policy, please talk about it from a national security standpoint. It is important that we grow our own food, that we produce it here, and that we're doing it in a way that protects the United States of America. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Now, please recognize Chairman Gallagher. Begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Scott, members of the committee. What an incredible opportunity to be able to discuss the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party.
In fact, today somebody actually sent me, it's funny, somebody sent me a map of the United States of America, and I think South Dakota was the state that swears the least, which I didn't even know that we were ranking. I don't think that's true, though. I've met enough ranchers for that. But you know, that is, we had the chance when President Trump was in the White House to cut taxes. I served on the committee in Congress that worked on that bill for 2.5 years. He trusts you with your own money. He trusts you with your own money to go out and make the best decisions for your family. And let me tell you what, this Vice President Harris, her belief has always been that the government makes better decisions than you do. She wanted government-run health care. She wants the government to pay for college, school loans. She wants the government to decide what your taxes are, and they all need to be higher. She has consistently mandated and dictated to people. It would be a whole different world if she gets into that White House than President Trump, and your future would be a lot less free. You'd have a lot less liberties, and I'm not certain if she's ever read the Constitution, because I've heard her embrace and seen her sign on to enough legislation and support it that clearly clearly says that you.
Mr. Lucas from Oklahoma for 5 minutes questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Governor, it's good to see you back in this room again. I think we'd both agree that a strong, healthy, vibrant rural America and production agriculture is the key to our national security. But I serve in a body now where memories are short. And I'd like to go back 10 years ago to when you and I worked together, that 2.5-year struggle, as you remember, to create the third generation Farm Bill. And maybe memories have numbed with time, but not just the way you conducted yourself in this committee on behalf of your constituents, but in those Republican conference committee meetings where we together battled diligently to get the attention of elected leadership about the importance of these farm bills. I will forever be eternally grateful for you backing me up in the way you handled the speaker and the floor leader on behalf of rural America and production agriculture. So thank you for that tenacity, which I suspect is only grown stronger with time in your role as governor.
Well, sir, you keep lighting people on fire and they get a little tougher, and understand that what you all say and matters, and what you do matters. The words you use have consequences, and it matters who's in leadership. So I have gone at times in my different roles, recognize that leadership needs to sit and listen to people and have conversations. We've become a country that has become addicted to being offended by each other. And therefore, we love to be offended by something that somebody has said, and I would just ask that we start listening to each other. The Farm Bill should be bipartisan. It should be bipartisan, that we be able to put a safety net out there, and I'm asking you to do it for the consideration of our food policy. If we think a pandemic was scary, can you imagine what happens if we can't feed our people? We are only 3 meals away from a crisis. And I've recognized and noticed as governor, as the CEO of my state, how much control China has, not just over manipulating our currency, stealing our IP, things we've known forever, that even my pension funds, I can't even get Vanguard to say that China's not an emerging market anymore. Everybody in the world will agree that they're not an emerging market. They should give me an ability to invest in a fund that doesn't have China in it, but I don't want to do that as a governor for my people to get them the best returns possible. But now when I look at our food supply system and our processing system, and we recognize that China's not our ally, yes, we do trade with them. And when we do trade, and I worked on trade agreements when I served on the Ways and Means Committee, I had the ability to notice that when we did trade agreements, we created friendlier neighborhoods. But we can't do that if we're not talking to each other and having conversations. So that Farm Bill, even though I picked a lot of fights with my own fellow Republicans, we got them done. And we're going to have to challenge both members of both parties to come back to the table to make sure we have that safety net so we continue to feed our families.
And thank goodness for that tenacity you demonstrated then and continue to demonstrate. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Now, please recognize the ranking member.
Yeah, what are we going to do to improve mental health and housing services for people on low income and disability? Because right now it's just horrible. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, I think in the state of Michigan, we definitely don't have enough services. We don't have them across the state. We have a significant issue. Even, as I traveled across the state, I had so many corrections officers say to us, we have people that shouldn't be in the jails. We have people that need mental health help, and we don't have it. And there was an opportunity for the governor to increase one of our facilities, and that didn't get increased to the extent that it should have. So we definitely need to look at how we can improve that across the state. And also, really, there's so many things that need to be done in Michigan. Even in the jails, we don't have enough corrections officers. They even asked the governor if she could send in the National Guard, and they were declined. So we have a significant problem here in the state of Michigan, and this is where I think that the collaboration between Republican governors is so great, because I know that as Republican governors in other states have come across issues, they've gotten together on calls, and even during COVID, got together on calls and said, how do we come around the people in our states and make it better? So I'll defer to you on what you've done.
No, that's what happens when people have a mental health challenge in their lives. A lot of times right now, today, they're ending up in an emergency room or in jail, right?
Yep.
Because something has happened in their life and they've hit a crisis, and they may end up with an addiction issue or something that puts them in one of those two, and neither one of them is appropriate for that situation. So we in our state in the last couple of years have built and funded 5 crisis care centers regionally across our state that's a short term. When somebody's in a crisis situation, they come into that crisis care center and we detox them, we start the counseling process, and we start the referrals to getting them a support system and counseling services that they need. It's made all the difference in the world, and we've engaged our churches. Because so many times people ask the government to do things that churches and people should be doing.
Yeah.
They ask people to walk alongside people, and they ask the government to raise our children. They ask the government to educate our children. They ask the government to feed people. And so much of that, and the responsibility for being a community, is the community, the churches, the faith organizations, that we were created to serve each other. And that's a point of it. The one thing that I would say about the situation that we have going on is that in South Dakota, we have just developed, and it'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks, in our elementary schools, a resiliency program. We're going to teach our kids how to have resiliency from the time that they're elementary students, and it's an amazing curriculum that we will give free of charge to all of our school districts if the counselors and the elementary teachers want to use it, but it's called South Dakota Sturdy, and it's using our historical figures to teach them about how they took hard things in their life, challenges, and used them to be stronger and to have the resiliency and to make decisions better and to do it. Because a lot of times we're asking parents right now to be parents that never had good parents. They don't know what it's like to be a good parent because they never had one. And somebody's got to give them that example, and that's what this curriculum will do.
We should have.
We start with Teddy Roosevelt, who you all know the challenges Teddy Roosevelt went through. Goodness sakes, the man was sick and then lost his wife and his mother on the same day and decided he was going to change his life. But some of those skill sets we can build into our children too. How about?
The question is, I just won a heavily contested race for the Michigan State House of Representatives for the 50th District, and I won it. And it's a 70-30 district, so I'm going to be the next Michigan State House of Representatives for that area. But, yeah. So my question is, what advice would you give to get more people engaged for those that may have a more difficult race, but getting our voters out? We saw that with this early voting, it hasn't been a success in the state of Michigan. As a matter of fact, less people voted in this primary than the one before. So that's my one question. And the other is, outside of obviously the obvious reason why you're having baby booms in your state, what do you attribute that to when other states are not having that? And thank you, and God bless you both. Yeah.
Do you want to talk to the advice for him running his race and helping other candidates win?
First and foremost, don't read the comments on social media.
Yes.
But seriously, I mean, to her point earlier, don't be offended. Keep going through. I mean, it's going to be tough, but the difference, I think, between what I see when we have the RNC convention as compared to the DNC convention is that this is a heart and soul mission. And sometimes I think it's harder when it's deep in your soul that you want to be serving people. And that can discourage a lot of people. And I think it's hard to get people involved from that standpoint. Right now, we are so viciously attacked. I mean, you've seen for months they've called Donald Trump a threat. And then, of course, when people are called a threat, someone wants to eliminate the threat. So you end up with a really bad guy, and boy, does that discourage people from running as Republicans right now. And so I would say there are so many people out there that love you, that respect you. There are people who are afraid to run, and you have to pray about it, and you have to ask God if this is what God is calling you to do. And sometimes it is really easy when God says, no, you're doing this, to be like, nah, I'm good. Trust me, I've been there. Listen to God, pray, sit with your family. So I will say, when I started running, someone said, pick the 10 people you trust the most and have them on your campaign. And by the end, you'll have 5. And go into it knowing that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's fantastic. I would just say continue to be genuine and normal. And that's why Donald Trump resonates with people, is because he's just normal. He doesn't give a debate perfect speech, or he's himself. I tell people all the time that he doesn't think he's better than anybody else. He really, truly doesn't. You talk to anybody who's worked for that man, anybody who's been close to him, he treats them like gold. He asks about their families. He asks about how they're doing, how their business is. He asks them, you know, what he can do to make their job better if they work for him anywhere. They love him because he cares about people truly, and he's normal, and he's genuine. And he has his flaws, and that's fine, and when people attack him, he punches back. So I'd say there might be a time where you got to punch back. And you got to stand up and show that you're strong. Yep. Yeah.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Don't be afraid to do that, because people do respect strength. They want you to know that you love people, but they also know that you're going to be strong enough to withstand the headwinds that we've got from the media, from the left, from all this woke that's going on around the country. You can be strong enough to do that and still care about people.
Judy? Well, mine was actually on the border. What can we do to strengthen our borders?
Well, I think it's fairly obvious that we can actually enforce stopping people at the border, and I think that's very important, and I think technology plays a key role in that. And just as she was talking about the Keystone Pipeline, all of the equipment being left there and just abandoned, let's remember that that same thing happened at the border when Joe Biden took over and said, we're not going to continue building the wall. And when you have just people down there fighting against people, you have a war, you don't have security. This is not fair to put our Border Patrol in this position. We have a gentleman here in the state of Michigan who just found out that his brother's killer, his conviction was overturned on a technicality. His brother was a Border Patrol agent down south, and now they have to go through this all over again after this happened in, 10 years ago to this family. This is outrageous that we continually allow this to just be like, oh, how could we possibly do it? It's really not that hard. And Kamala Harris saying she's gonna hire all these new Border Patrol agents. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. There is so much more involved, and that's why I encourage all of you to force the Democrats on your local level to tell you how. How are you gonna do that? Don't just accept that, oh, the other side is bad. Don't accept, if you don't vote for me, you're under threat. Ask them how, because it has to be a strategic plan, and it has to go beyond an executive order. It would be lovely if we could get Congress together to pass a bill, but do not be deceived by this, oh, Donald Trump is better at whipping votes than we are, and he was able to get people to vote against the bill. I mean, how pathetic, first of all. Why would you admit that? Secondly, there was bipartisan disapproval of this bill. There were people on both sides who said, you are going to make it legal to have thousands of people come across this border every day and put children in danger, continue to do this?
Yes.
You are going to enshrine this in law? No, that is not the answer. The answer is to make sure you have a strong border and a strong immigration plan, and that's not coming from the Harris administration.
Yeah, that bill codified illegal immigration. It said illegal immigration was now going to be law. It would be allowed going forward. All we have to do right now is to enforce our federal law. We just have to follow the law. If we had a president that followed the law, we'd have a secure border. Now, obviously, President Trump has said, build a wall. I'm all in favor of building a wall. I've seen walls work. They work. And we need to continue to do that.
They worked last week in Chicago. I heard they had a wall.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. But it's not rocket science. I mean, you follow the law, you build a barrier where you need it, where you know where the vulnerable places on our border are, and you make sure that people have the opportunity to come to the United States of America. They just have to follow the law when they come.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have incredible threats to our country right now. 2 years ago, I was at the southern border. I was actually the first governor to deploy National Guard troops down to the southern border to protect our country. Now other states are following our lead, and they're sending their National Guard as well. And make no mistake, an invasion of our country is happening, and our border is a war zone. It is the fault of Joe Biden and his violation of federal law. I was alarmed recently to hear Democrats encouraging Biden to federalize the National Guard under Title X in order to take them away from the control of governors and take away my ability to be their commander-in-chief of the National Guard. I recognized immediately the danger in this threat. If the president took that action, to remove me as Commander-in-Chief of my South Dakota National Guard. It would be the first time in American history that a president paid soldiers to stand down, to not protect our country. So I went to the border the very next day. I offered to bring razor wire there so Texas would know that South Dakota stands with them, and I would load it in my truck and bring it. And I wanted them to know that we will defend our state's rights to protect our people and to protect them from a corrupt federal government. When I came home, I gave a joint address to my legislative session, and that very day our state legislature passed a resolution in support of securing our border and standing with Texas. South Dakota was the very first state legislature in this nation to take such an aggressive action, and I am so proud of them for doing that. This week, I announced that we will be deploying National Guard soldiers to the border for the 5th time. This time, they will be constructing a wall, a barrier, to keep those who want to come to this country illegally out, and to stop them from trafficking drugs, from proliferating the sex trafficking of our women and our children, and to stop the inhumanity of Joe Biden's border policies. Now, we have cartel presence right in our state of South Dakota because of that open border. My people are affected by it every day. I will do all I can in South Dakota to bring back peace and stability where Joe Biden has brought destruction and death. We know that China is taking advantage of the situation, that they're funneling military-aged men into our country, and many dangerous criminals and terrorists from other countries who hate us are making their way here too. Some countries are emptying out their prisons and their mental health institutions to send their responsibilities to us to handle.